Welcome, everyone, to Collaborative Strategies for Raising Seed Capital and Working Capital, looking at alternative funding mechanisms. My name is Lori Elliott, and I'm with Conceptual Lee and also with Global Stratos. Global Stratos is our implementation arm, and Conceptual Lee is focused on research strategy and early stage development. Now, today we are going to cover several different topics. First of all, we're going to talk about collaborative wealth, what it is, what it looks like, and what it's not. Then we're going to talk about the principles of collaborative wealth, which include sharing, giving, and volunteering. We're going to talk about different ways to leverage resources, including financial, which are savings groups, known sometimes for people in different countries, Stockville, Susu, savings associations, rotating credit and saving associations. There are a variety of names. Then we'll also talk about shifting from the real economy to the asset economy, which is not only important in building the wealth that we're looking at or developing a path for that, but it's an overall mandate that we have to do, particularly now with things that have happened as a result of the COVID crisis. And then we'll also look at leveraging those assets for funding and preparing to raise capital for larger funding needs and combining techniques to accelerate and enlarge available funds. So basically, I just want to give you a little bit of background as to why I decided to do this and also how we kind of got where we are. So our companies primarily focus on project development. That's our core capability. In particular, we are very strong in early stage. Now, any of you who have developed new ideas, new ventures, know that there's actually very little funding available to people and other types of resources unless you already have them yourself. So if you're already wealthy, if you already have good channels where people will provide you resources and all of that, then you have a better chance of moving your project forward. It doesn't mean that it's going to be successful, but certainly, money and resources grease the wheels. So things, move more quickly, not necessarily better, but more quickly. And so over the years, as we've been working on this, we've been focused on this, not so much on serving clients because we work with partnerships mostly in collaboration. So we bring our strengths and we work with others who bring other strengths. And then we develop the projects, and then the projects are not funded when they're bankable. And also everyone then who were major contributors to the project or the idea of the product will share in the revenue, right? Or the increase that comes from the performance of that particular project or product. And so, over the years, there have been times where we've had a lot more cash, less resources, all sorts of different combinations. And I'm sure all of you have been through something, or almost all of you, and particularly now with COVID, for many people, it's, if they didn't experience it before with COVID, it's bringing a new awareness, new situations where people and organizations are really just struggling to survive. And those who want to and have a good idea that can shift them into something new and make them sustainable for the long term have difficulty obviously finding the resources to shift unless they have plenty stocked up. So in our particular case, we had finally, it's been a long journey, it's been a difficult one, but a rewarding one. And finally last year, we really came to a major milestone. We found a mechanism so that when we're working on early stage projects, if it's combined with certain things that our partners need, we can structure things and based on their strength, because primarily we work with government as an example, that we can help them obtain what they need and manage that project, and then also introduce elements of early stage development that can be paid for. Now, in that case, we're not necessarily trying to make a lot of profit, because what we're basically trying to do is to ensure that the projects, which may not be the focus of what the client, the partner wants at that time, right? But we look at ways that we can help them with our areas of strength and then structure it in such a way so that it serves as a launch pad for, for the projects that we really want to develop. So anyway, we have an agreement with one small African country, a memorandum of understanding, and we are working on some others. So in principle, we do serve, like for example, we can provide products and services and do different things. We're working on some new things in order to provide a breadth of opportunities, to serve our partners, and then we can also serve third parties. But, as any of you know, it's really kind of a struggle to do all of this and to have sufficient resources and capital. So we were really excited, and actually, I was actually really excited. Finally, got something that we could methodically use, to advance what we were doing. And then of course COVID came along, and we can still use that vehicle. But when we looked at the position of what our partners might be in at the time, it didn't seem really to help them very much to give them a project and have them get it funded. Because many of them have very tight budgets, that's the reason why they're doing funding. So they can leverage their funds better, their available funds. But now with COVID, a lot of stuff is wiped out. They need money to do other things. So basically, we basically kind of stepped back from that approach. Not that we can't use it because it's there, but we really have to look at the situation. So that then brought us back to, the general problems that we've been working to close and solve as far as getting resources and funding for early stage projects. And so, like I said, we've been continually working on things in parallel. And so with COVID, there are some things that actually got accelerated and has allowed us to open up other pathways in order to, achieve what we want to do, still work on those projects, still focus on early stage, and not having to be required to focus so much on a client environment. Now, everyone is not the same, different companies, different objectives, obviously, different organizations, but we're a social enterprise really focused on inclusive, integrated development with, a solid economic base in the middle of that. And so for us, we're looking at the long-term benefit, not to just us, but to communities and, other key stakeholders. So again, that same problem that we were having, over the years is cropping back up after we, had an open window. But typically, this is what I'm introducing today is what we're moving towards anyways, but it just takes longer to develop. But we're finally at a point where enough of the things are in the right place where we can actually, begin to take advantage of the things that we've known that are there. So today I'm going to give you the foundation that you need to have in terms of understanding before you can move into that. Because one of the things that people feel when we talk about collaboration, they just think it's a group of people kind of getting together and kind of doing a thing. No, you have to have the right mindset, you have to have the right heart. And so if you're not willing to do that part, the other part really won't work with you. It'll break down because it's not sustainable because you're doing it for the wrong reasons and the wrong motivations. So I just want to be upfront about that. So anytime you feel this is not for you, please feel free to, to stop the webinar. You can leave. That's totally fine. I recognize and I know that everyone is not going to want to go down this path. Okay, but if you can learn anything from it, please feel free. We believe in sharing what we know, not everything, because some of it's IP, but, we're willing to share because we want to ensure that other people are also going to get opportunities. So we're going to start today just talking about wealth a little bit. In general, wealth is defined as an abundance of valuable possessions or money, and that's true, but it's not really a complete picture. The Hebrew concept of wealth is shalom, which means complete and nothing missing. Wealth in that is a holistic structure, both tangible and intangible. And I really like what William Feather said. And I'm adapting his quote. It's a system of wealth that is energy and ideas. And that's important because energy is around everywhere. It's every part of our universe. So you're going to have to kind of expand your thinking and try to, press into what I'm saying here. And so even the gaps in between us and objects or us and whatever is full of energy. And so that's called the field of energy potential. Is everywhere. And out of that, you form ideas, okay? Your cognitive senses, all of it connects all of the energy. And energy is both intangible and tangible things. So our computers, our walls, our desks, our persons are actually energy, but in the form of matter. So essentially, energy is matter and matter is energy. They're just in a different form. And this concept is, just to illustrate, let's just look at matter. Let's look at water. Water is a solid. When it's a solid, it's ice. It's a gas, which means it's a vapor. And then when it's a liquid, it's the fluid stuff, right? And so it's really the same larger concept for energy. And the key is to bring the energy to, attracting energy to create form. And that's really ideas. It's really all kind of linked. It's a different type of energy, certainly. It's not electric energy. It's our cognitive energy, things that, the energy that fuels our ability to create. Okay. And so if you have a field of energy potential everywhere in the universe, that means you have just as many ideas, which means it's really infinite, okay? But the idea is to be able to capture that and develop it and create higher forms of value, okay? And so if you're able to do that and flow in that, you can then attract resources and funding and partnerships and all sorts of things because you are increasing and creating value or augmenting it, leveraging it, enhancing it, expanding it. A lot of different, verbs that you could use. So when we think of wealth, and I will, return to that concept when I talk about collaborative wealth vehicles, that type of wealth is very expansive, and it's also inclusive. The idea is that it's not just available for a few, but for many, if they are willing to drive that path and that process, right? And that's, why a lot of people like capitalism or democracy, because they believe that it allows you to do that. I could argue against that. There are different mindsets, but certainly in history, people would say that capitalism and democracy have been a very good thing. There are issues with those two things, and that's probably the best that humans have been able to do up to a certain point in our history. But hopefully we can look to a brighter future and different history that doesn't have the problems that are attached to some of our existing political and economic structures. Anyway, let's not get into politics. Let's not get into all of the detailed issues. What we want to focus on here is being able to shift ourselves into driving the ability to attract resources and funding. So collaborative capitalism, I have this here just because I wanted to give you an idea about a shift in thinking and a shift of being and doing. So an economic model, policy, approach, or development strategy, that's what collaborative capitalism is, but it's one in which an individual's, investors, corporations, or country's economic interests are best served through a proactive strategy that seeks to improve the well-being, economic purchasing power, and capabilities of other individuals, corporations, or countries. So basically, it's not about you, it's about we. And this last part is very important because wealth is not just money or tangible assets. Remember when we talked about wealth in the Hebrew concept shalom, it means complete and nothing missing. So wealth can include and does include health, mental acuity, fitness, vitality, well-being, good relationships, all sorts of things, the ability to, learn and to grow, anything that represents the well-being of individuals and groups of people, okay? And so when we are looking at that, this is really what we are focusing on from the aspect of best served through a proactive strategy, all the other pieces. So starting from there to the end. We're not worried about the economic model and policy so much. Obviously, it's be great if governments and other institutions supported such an approach, but hey, they don't have to for us to be successful. It can be more difficult, but we can do it if we work together. But let me also indicate that being collaborative is not crowds. Crowdsourcing is the practice of obtaining needed services, ideas, or content by soliciting contributions from a large group of people and especially from the online community. Crowdfunding, specifically, is the collection of funds in a similar fashion. In the United States, we even have new laws called, can't remember the full name, but anyways, it's the Jumpstart Act. And that was instituted 4 or 5 years ago, which does allow you to use crowdfunding, for example, to raise capital for your company. And even if you're a foreigner, for example, if you establish a US company, you can actually use that mechanism, okay? However, crowdfunding is a crowd. That means that you cannot distinguish people, you do not know those people overall, and so it's a very mass approach. Collaborative capital is different. It's where a defined group of people and organizations input various forms of capital to build value and wealth from which they will benefit directly, okay? And we call this structure from a structure perspective, the collaborative wealth vehicle. Now, when we also talk about collaboration happens at different levels, okay? So again, just trying to give you enough understanding so when I talk about certain things and when I outline the path of collaborative strategies, particularly the combined path, right, or the combined strategies, then you will understand the foundation under which all of that is going to be undergirded. And if that foundation is not there, it's not going to work well. You might work for a while, but again, you want to work with people who are like-minded. So we're spending the time so we can understand what's going to give us a firm foundation so that we can actually do this and be successful for all of us. So when we talk about level of collaboration, there is no collaboration, not linked. There's communication where you do share information only when it is advantageous to you. There's cooperation where you share information and resources and work together when opportunities arise. But it's not really regular, right? It happens once in a while. Coordination is where you work side by side as separate organizations to achieve common goals. So for example, if there's a school that's doing a drive and there's another group who's big into literacy, as an example, they may combine efforts, right? Because there's overlapping common goals. And so they may work on an initiative together. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are really collaborating. They're just coordinating and leveraging, right, the strengths of each other, okay? And aligning is not really the right word, but let me just say they're syncing, right, in order to get, better impact. And again, there's really nothing wrong with most of these levels, and Typically, when we think about relationships, they're going to go from one level to another so that you can do higher forms of collaboration. And then collaboration is working side by side and actively pursuing opportunities to work together, but no formal agreement. So this is where you've really decided that, hey, this group looks like they could be really good partners, over a period of time, in particular the long term. And you are actively looking at how you can begin to engage, but you don't necessarily have a formal agreement. You can have one, but you don't necessarily have one. And then a partnership is where it is now official. Now, do not confuse this between having a legal partnership structure, a company structure, as would be like under the Companies Act of a particular country, or like in the United States, we have laws by state. It's still a formal agreement, right, with commitments, but it does not have to be that legal structure, okay, is what I am trying to get across. But basically now you're working together as a formal team with specific responsibilities to achieve common goals and have a formal agreement. It might be representative, for example, of a joint venture agreement that you come into. You can also have, other forms of agreements, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. And then fully linked is where you have mutually plan and share resources to accomplish common goals. And that's what we're really pushing for, basically saying, all of us, we're a community, we're a part of one another. We are acknowledging the fact that already exists, but we have to develop the relationships and work in a way that will do that mutual benefit for everyone. Okay? So when we talk about collaboration, one of the things that happens is the higher the collaboration, typically, the greater value creation, because basically you're now in the form of value creation where you have different parties, key stakeholders who are working together, and each group or each person is bringing unique sets of capital, which we'll talk again, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And so you get a very diverse and vibrant, if it's healthy, meeting of the minds, right? You get a very diverse and powerful platform to create many different things and solve many different problems, okay? And that's really where we want to sit and where we want to be. And it creates higher value for everyone because there's meaning in it. When we experience something, when we work with someone, when we create something new out of that, we are really tied to that. And there's an embedded loyalty, not loyalty to the point of accepting bad behavior and those types of things, but a loyalty and a stickiness, right? Where you are in some ways bound to each other. Now, certainly there's the agreement, the formal agreement at this level, but there's also an underlying bond. And that underlying bond is really important because it is represented as trust. And Stephen Covey wrote a book many years ago called The Speed of Trust. And if that bond is there and it's healthy, then resources begin to flow more freely and more quickly. And so this is really where we're trying to get at in terms of developing, groups of people like ourselves, what we do. That's what we're trying to do, is work at that level. And then basically, create a flow. And I'll talk about that more later. But I also wanted to talk about value because value is really at the center of this. In fact, value, you can switch out energy for value. So there is a field of value potential. It's as big as really the energy field, right? It is, and it's based though on you forming matter, right? Creating something tangible, taking those ideas, those things that you cannot see, and making them tangible and making them work and perform and benefit other people, right? And that's what drives business. That's what drives growth. That's what drives wealth. Okay, it's value. So the first thing that we're talking about here is the states of value, because value can be expressed in different states or different forms. Okay. And basically, what I consider to be good value may be bad value for you, and vice versa, because some of it has to do with how we're designed, what's good for us and what's not good for us. But when we look at the whole, or the whole of creation, the whole of the universe, there's a balance and a harmony that comes together so that all of the pieces function and continue to thrive. And they can actually be polar opposites, but still be part of a system that works. And that is the interesting part. So, for example, I hate rodents and snakes. I cannot stand them. Now, I'm not going to kill them because they're too big, right? I'm not keen on doing anything, but I cannot stand them. But yet, on the other hand, they're important because they take care of certain things in our ecosystems, okay? And so that balance of having them, even though I don't like them, they are actually a good thing overall, okay? So that means that everything that exists has value because it has a purpose and a function. Even if it's not a value or a purpose or a function that we honor, a particular person. We may not like that. We may not like that way of doing something or whatever. And that's okay, as long as we can respect that those things that they exist and that they're a part of a much grander scheme, much grander design. Okay, so at the first level, existence, every person and object has an intrinsic value due to their existence, due to their purpose and their function. We then tend to, and we're going from abstract to really, hopefully more concrete things when we talk about states of value. Then we describe things in terms of strength and weakness. Strength indicates a positive value, weakness indicates a negative. And we can phrase it differently also: profit loss, good bad, benefit cost, etc. Then an asset, a structure of asset or a state of asset, is a useful, beneficial, or valuable item that can be tangible or intangible. But typically, at this point, we're talking about someone actually controlling something or possessing it. So it can be yourself or someone else. Resource is a supply of a tangible or intangible asset that can be used to effectively operate, but it's typically, not activated. Capital or working capital are resources that are actually used to operate effectively. You're actually making an investment of capital, but that capital doesn't mean just financial. It can be knowledge, it can be, equipment, it can be a lot of different things. And then certainly at the end, there's wealth when you have an accumulation of value or an accumulation of assets to the level of abundance. So, for example, someone who is an expert, a technical expert in an area, they have an abundance, they have a wealth of knowledge, right? That's a phrase that we use often. And so that means that they are very, very wealthy in that area, okay? They have an overabundance, more than they may need, and then they can share with others, right? So the concept of value, it's very important to understand the states because there's value all around us. And most of us only think of financial or maybe a few avenues of resources in order to help us tap into, ways of growing our venture or our idea. And so the first principle that we work with, and other than collaboration, is the ability to widen and recognize and use a broader and deeper range of resources and assets, making them capital that works for us and works for our ventures or our ideas. So then there's forms of value, which basically says that they're basically categories in which you can think about, okay, what value do I have, or what may I not have that's, strong enough, right? It might be a weakness instead of a strength. And you can do a real simple, strength and weakness T-chart and just list things by category. And it's just very helpful to do that periodically, but there's a lot of times things that we just don't think about. And sometimes we need to reflect in order to uncover the value that we have access to, whether it's value that we have or it's value that people that we either have influence over or with that can provide those resources and capital to us. So I'm just going to go through this relatively quickly because there are like 7 slides, and we're not really intent on focusing on this. They're there so that when you look at the slides, you can read through it and begin to identify those hidden things of value that you never knew that you had. Okay. And that's important because that now gives you or empowers you, let's say, to think of new ways of structuring value so that you can drive your product, so that you can find resources and funding. And so it's really a continual exercise to continually understand what type of value you have, what can you develop quickly, for example, to change your position into a stronger position. And so, again, we have collaboration, we have value, and they all work together very well, okay? So first of all, there's identity, and this is really your core identity. Who are you? Okay, are you, who is your authentic self? And many of us, we never actually really get any great understanding about who we are until we're very old, or we may never. But the power to create and the power to sustain comes not just because you're a human being that lives and works and gets money. It comes from who you are and what you are designed to do, what your purpose is. And when you have that, you get passion, you get purpose, you get perseverance, you get many of the different characteristics that you need in order to drive your ideas. And then experience, of course, over time, you gain different experiences. Some of those experiences can be good, some of them are bad, but all of them together actually make you stronger and better. For a long time with the challenges of trying to do early stage work, I mean, honestly, it is crazy, right? Because people say, well, how are you going to make money? Well, we make money when the project's developed. Okay. It's just, it's a disconnect for most people. And, sometimes I really agreed, because it's crazy sometimes. But the point was that, with the experience, the bad experiences through that now have empowered us to overcome a lot of those early stage issues and problems, okay? The challenges we had, they actually make us stronger. They also helped us see the world in a different way, which meant that we now came up with different solutions to overcome our challenges. And then, of course, ideas. That's the whole point of what I said. You have all this energy, you have all this value around you, but basically, in order to capture that, you have to create and structure and configure that value so that it can be used. Okay, and so ideas are a part of that. That's the initial thing that comes into your head. But ideas, again, have stages of growth and maturity. And so you can have an idea in your head. If it's vague, has no structure, has no legs, you're really not going to get many resources. But when you have spent the time to develop and mature it, and you're able to implement, or it's feasible, then you generally can get access to resources and funding. Now, that's assuming that you have also prepared in different areas so that when the time is there for you to, or where you need it, right, it will be available because you prepared for that. What's an example? Okay, so basically I tell people, you really don't want to bother bankers and investors until your project is bankable, okay? And that's because 95% of funding is based on a bankable project, or even based on you having already been successful and making money and having cash flow. Okay. So, there's very little pool for something that is not fully developed and working. Okay. So now in this situation with COVID, it's, even worse for many, right? So the point here is that when you have matured it, you now generally can get access to resources and funding. But with that idea of the investor, you want to understand what they want before you get to that point, because even if you can get funding from that point that you first engage them, it might take you 3, 6 months, 9 months, a year to get funding. And then you are struggling, right? So the preparation is talking to bankers, finding out what their requirements are, saying, I am working on something. It's not ready, being honest, but can I talk to you so I understand that when it is ready, when we are in the right time, the right place, and we got our stuff in order, uh, you know, I want to understand how we engage you. What's the process like? What are your requirements? So you're really doing some other things to prepare yourself, and that's what we're talking about today. This is not a short-term road of, getting money in a month or two. You can, okay, there are ways to do that. There are ways to accelerate it, but we're not just looking for this one-off. We're looking for a system that is sustainable, that over time will provide resources and funding to you to do many different ideas and many different, initiatives. So innovation is the process of creating or innovating. It's having an ability to create or innovate. And so it's more process oriented. Ideas are the content, or creativity is, it's also kind of a process, but it's more of an ability. And so basically, innovation is also the ability to be able to innovate and having a method or a process that allows you to do it more efficiently and effectively is actually great value. And so, like our methodology, that's really of high value. Okay. And so basically, when we look at our structure of value, right, what's available, that's one of the key pieces that we have that we can offer to people because we have put in the time and we've done the effort, and it's highly valuable and it helps others. So that's something we can bring to the table. Now, again, it's not going to be something that everyone wants, even though we believe everyone needs to have that capacity. Some people will not choose it because they're not ready. Some people will not step into it because, they don't want to do all the work. Some people have their own ways of doing things and they don't see it the same way we do. And that's okay. We have to learn that, there are going to be some that you cannot convince. Okay. And that gets back to what I was saying about value. What I perceive as valuable, others may not. Okay. And we have to be okay with that. Okay. Intangible is simply an asset or a thing that is not tangible, right? It's invisible. So that can be knowledge, intellectual property, thoughts, ways of being, attitudes. Okay. Intellectual refers to knowledge or information that is applied. So a lot of people have a lot of data, they have a lot of information, they have a lot of knowledge, but they actually don't apply it in a productive manner. Okay, and so basically when we think of intellectual property, that's knowledge and information that you've designed, that's unique, that allows you to do something productive. Then there's knowledge and information, which is below intellectual. It's not necessarily applied. It can be stored. And again, it may have great value, but if it's not activated as a form of capital, right, meaning that it's actually put to use, helping you to operate effectively, again, it's wasted value. Living is when we're talking about a group of people in a geographic place or region. It also applies to the rich diversity of ecosystems to support life. So, for example, in certain regions, there are wetlands that support different types of plants and different types of animals, and the people in the area may eat of the plants and eat some of the animals, right, that are maintained by that natural ecosystem. So this is really dealing with living organisms, not the entire biosphere or whatever. Material is a complement to that. It's really talking about physical things, tangible assets, but physical things. It can be building, it can be equipment, land, commodities, precious metals, oil. Okay, things again that typically can be touched and seen. And then positional is based on the roles that you have in society. So I'm a daughter, I'm a godmother, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a coach, I'm a innovator, I'm a project developer, I participate. I'm sorry, I'm losing track of my my thoughts here. And so I'm an academic, okay, because I'm been both a professor and also a student, right? So and all of these things put us in a certain position in society. And if it's the right position, that position can open doors to us to other things. Okay, we can access resources, we can access funding. And so think about, okay, I'm a member of this chamber, I'm a member of this faith house, all sorts of different ways. And think about, okay, I know these people, and because I'm in this position, I have a certain amount of influence over these types of things. You might have influence over relationships, with people, not over people themselves, right? It's not a control thing. But basically, because you're in that position, people listen to you more, right? It can be something very simple. And all of that is often value that we cannot grasp, right? We don't really, we can't visualize it. But it's those underlying bonds of trust that create the opening to get those resources and funding. And again, these positions can be formal or informal. Relational is related to having the ability and sustaining one-on-one relationships. Okay, so by developing relationships in a meaningful way, that means that, again, it creates opportunities for you to have greater influence, to get access to additional resources, people, networks, and funding. Social is more broad, okay? So that's basically your social networks, not the software, but the people, okay? And basically, when we talk about social networks, we think of them as networks. Like, I know because I worked in this business, I have a network of people. So typically it's more informal, okay? But it extends your sphere of influence much more broadly. So you can have great relationships, for example, right? But you might only, because it's hard for us to have individual relationships to, 1,000 or 2,000 people, right? But the expanse of your network from those very strong relationships. So let's say 20 people and you engage with them regularly, and each one of them know 20 people, right? And that's 400. And then each of those 400 know another 20. It keeps going out. And the idea is if there's trust between all those different levels, right? Someone can refer you maybe three people down to someone that you need, and the door is open. Okay. And so social networks, the ability to deal one-on-one, both of those really work hand in hand together. Spiritual is an external, it's not external, it's a complement to your identity. And simply what I mean by spirit is that it's the driving force, it's your essence that comes forth out of your identity. And it then impacts what you do, what you think, and what you create. Okay. And if you have the right spirit, right, you're going to develop good things and big things and successful things. And so the more you know yourself, the more that you're working out of your purpose, out of your identity, then you are able to do more. And that's a little bit hard to explain for people who have not experienced it, but there's a natural ability to persevere in things that you find purpose in, okay? I don't know how many times when we're dealing with early stage development, We have done what people thought has failed. I mean, dozens, probably hundreds of times, right? But the interesting thing is when we come out, we're always out on top. We always get another opportunity. And so our failures are not really failures. They're just really tests or ways of us gaining experience so that we can do better the next time. So in that regard, right, because we're working out of our purpose, there is an innate sense of perseverance. There is an innate sense of passion that drives us, right? And that then begins to overpower that sense of failure, okay? That so many of us, I mean, I've felt it, I've wanted to give up, but the next day I would get up and I would keep moving, okay? And that did not come from my external environment, because the external environment looked like there was nothing, there was no way, there was no door, no opening. It came from the inside. And that's what we really mean by spirit. Now, financial I put as last, because in the reality of things, it doesn't seem like that, but finance is the last thing that you actually want to rely on. You want to rely on your ability to collaborate and have that network and that undergirding system of trust. Because then once you have that, you can then get access to those resources, to the funding, and so on and so forth. So it's an important aspect, but really it's a part of a whole tapestry of resources and capital that you put together, okay? Now, that gives you the background. So now we're going to really start talking about the element of the alternative funding mechanisms, okay? Or means of helping you move from, one step in your venture to a new step, to a new level. So here we have collaborative capital. And again, I'm not going to read all of this in detail, but basically just visualize. You plant a seed, you get a tree when it grows fully, and that tree produces fruit. And when it produces that fruit, and let's stick with an apple tree, then it has seeds within it. Some of those seeds you may eat. Some of them you may store. Some of them you will plant, right? So some of you put it for the future. Some of it you put in the ground right now so you continue to multiply. And some of it you may actually eat or use, right? And so when we think about money, when we think about resources, we can really think the same thing. But the point is that when we follow this model, this universal model, we then get overflow, and you can think of orchards. So just as an example, one tree typically produces, and again, I'm not an expert, I've seen this in a couple places, so it may not be 100% correct, but just as an example, an apple tree produces 5,000 apples a year, and it produces 1,000 apples a year, but there are 5 seeds in every apple. So that means you have 5 seeds. So now you have an opportunity to plant another 5,000 trees that will produce 5,000 seeds, right? Exponential multiplication. Okay, this is what we're really trying to kick in. Okay, how do we get to that level? Even starting with, from where we are with very small sums of money. How do we do this? Okay, or small resources. Okay, and that's what we're going to take, our journey on right now. So we call this the Pishon path of prosperity. I like to have acronyms, so this is PPP. Pishon is a Hebrew word for increase. It is an ancient river not recognized today. But that sense of increase and the way that Pishon worked, it was a river that surrounded an entire piece of land. So it was a continual, right? It was a continual movement. So that's really what we want to get into. We want to get into a continual flow of increase. And so the key to unlock collaborative wealth is the creation and leverage of wealth, as well as the continued flow of value, the right value at the right place at the right time. And as individuals, we need to be propagators. That means we're multiplying, we're planting, we're harvesting, and then we're planting again. But we still eat some of it, we store some of it, and then we put a portion to productive use. So characteristics of a propagator is, again, like I said, connecting into your identity, into your essence. You would have passion and you would have purpose. And you would bring to a collaborative effort participation, sharing, giving, and volunteering. I'll talk about that in a moment. Proficiencies and professions. These are your capabilities, right? Your possessions. And then having a attitude of prosperity. Prosperity is a process which leads to wealth. It's the intermediary process that involves multiplication. Okay, and that's, if you can sit and think about that, prosperity is a good thing. An overflow of things, wealth is a good thing. But again, if you don't have the underlying foundation, wealth can actually constrain you. Okay, because what happens? A lot of people, when they become wealthy, they start hoarding. So it's very important in any economy that there is a flow of resources and capital. So we see now, for example, there's a dearth of that in a lot of places. The economy shut down. So that means that people, are now at a disadvantage. Some people are losing homes, they're losing businesses and all those types of things because the flow is stopped, right? So what we want to do is we want to create mechanisms that can sustain and be resilient to many forms of disruptions, right? And nothing is perfect, but we have to prepare for this. And so when we're talking about Pishon, there are three ways that you prepare. There are three elements of being able to do this. One is cultivating your identity, working out of your identity. That's number one. That's an underlying thing. The second thing is to develop ideas and keep developing them. And the third thing is to invest in yourself and others. That can be putting money into projects, that can be giving, that can be working together, which we'll talk about, in order to create a base of resources and funding that everyone can tap into, right? And get their needs met or exceeded. And so really these pillars are the DNA structure for increase. And it's that path and process of prosperity. So I'm not going to get into identity, but I do just want to mention one aspect of ideas. And I did hint at it earlier. So if you look at this is what we call cultivation engine. And it's basically the cycle of an idea, a product, or a venture. It goes from the idea, which is very abstract, it's not tangible, to startup, to growth, to maturity, to rebirth or death. Okay. And if you look at the bottom, you'll notice that development is that period where it's not necessarily viable or feasible, but you're developing it. And this is where most of us get stuck, right? Because we can't bring it to market because we're developing it. We may have clients, for example, but not enough clients to give us the cash flow, right? In order to grow or to tap different forms of funding, as an example. Now, when we get into startup and moving forward, we now become more sustainable, hopefully. But at some point, that product, that venture, is going to run into a problem, okay? And hey, COVID is a good example. And you either have the opportunity to be reborn or to die off, okay? And so there's a process of living the life of an entrepreneur and continually developing ideas. Sometimes you develop the wrong ideas, sometimes you're off the mark. But when you have the ability to innovate and create and grow it, right? Even you can start from nothing and start over, okay? Now, a lot of people don't like to hear that, but this is what the human being has the capability of doing. We do not have to give in to the pressures of the external. If we're working in our purpose, in our passion, in our identity, in our core essence, that gives us the ability to persevere. Now, it's not 100% proof. It's not, people can come into periods in their life where they just, cannot take anymore, okay? But without that internal strength, right, it's virtually impossible for people to really be sustainable, okay, and not get stuck. So anyway, but on the other flip side of that, right now, if we look at this, we cannot expect that a banker is going to give us money for an idea that doesn't have any legs to it. That's not feasible. And that's really the process of maturation. Think about it. You do not give your car keys to an 8-year-old to drive it. One, they maybe can't see over the dashboard. Their feet don't reach the pedals. They don't have the situational awareness or the ability to look at all the different stuff that goes around when you're driving. And so it's just stupid, right? And so think for investors, okay, or people who are giving you money, okay, before your idea is feasible. It's just not a logical thing, okay? However, if you follow a methodical process, and people can see that there is a rigorous or methodical way that you're doing this, and you can create success because you're doing the process, right? It now opens you up to potential opportunities earlier in the cycle of developing an idea. Now, let's just speak specifically now about the alternative forms of funding that I'm going to speak about. There's sharing, giving, and volunteering, resource-based collaborative wealth vehicle, and that simply means that it's not the financial part. Then we will talk about ways to leverage that with also financial means, using the rotating credit and savings associations, assets and alternative assets, and collaborative capital. And what's embedded in here also is shifting some of our assets that into better assets is probably a better way. And that's moving from the real economy to the asset economy. And I'll explain that in a moment. Now, creating flow. The basic principles of creating flow is letting go, right? Releasing it, putting it into movement, okay? And so sharing, giving, and volunteering are very basic principles of creating flow. Share is where you use, occupy, or enjoy something of yours jointly with other people. Give is when you give ownership of something you have to someone else, with or without expecting something in return. There is something we often say like giving a seed. Okay, you'll hear that a lot. That means that you are planting something in someone's life. You're giving them something that will grow, will help them grow. And in those cases, you sometimes will just give. In other cases, you will expect some type of return, okay? Whether informally or formally, okay? And that's okay. Now, the altruistic giving is to give without expecting it in return. And so basically, we should be willing to do that too, okay? It's not supposed to just be a give and get, okay? It's supposed to be a spirit and a movement of creating flow. Even if you're thinking in your mind, okay, I need to create this flow for myself, give, okay? And it will be given unto you, okay? And then the last part is volunteering, and that's basically putting your body into it, okay? You're literally, it's not just your mind, it's not something else, it's literally you giving of yourself, okay? You're volunteering, you're offering to participate in an enterprise, an initiative, or undertake a task, like volunteering to mentor someone or to coach someone or to help someone who's a startup go through the steps that you have just gone through. Okay, so there's many different ways of doing this, and it doesn't have to be, none of these things have to be formal. It's again a spirit of creating flow. And by creating flow and helping people in their times of need, then it creates a flow around you where things not only are going out, but they can come back in. Okay, and you should expect that, not just at an individual level necessarily for a specific area where you have shared, given, or volunteered, but as a whole system, right? That it should be working that way. So that's really the principles of the sharing, giving, and volunteering. And so that's the first thing that you have to do. You have to have that type of attitude. You have to live that in order to begin to develop a better system that it will work collaboratively. Because if you're not willing to share and then, or give or volunteer, and that doesn't mean you have to give everything, share everything, and volunteer for everything. That's not what it is. It's a strategic structure of determining where to put your resources. So for example, people will often ask me to help them look at their business plan, do different things, and so on and so forth related to developing their venture. And basically, I tell them, I can't do that. You first have to go through and, go through some of our workshops, and I'll give you some of the tools to help you get started. Once you've got that done, then, I'll be glad to look at it. And the reason for that is most people are not ready for me to review their stuff because there's a lot of gaps. And so, whereas I'm very willing to, help, I can only help one person at a time in that case. And in the other regard, it takes so much of my time, which means that I can't do other things. So I have to balance. So that was actually part of the reason that we developed the methodology in order to create ventures, because people were asking for that. They didn't have money or didn't want to pay, or they don't want to pay a lot of money and all that stuff. And so what I found is I was spending a lot of time helping people do things, but they weren't really committed to their own stuff, right? And so, I had to change something that allowed me to help many people and help some people in certain circumstances when they were ready. And that's also an example of creating the right flow, right? Helping people with the right thing at the right time, at the right place, okay? And not just, giving and sharing everything all the time, which you can do, okay? There are times when, you may feel that you really need to just give, and that's good. But there's a lot of strategy and structure behind that, okay? As a system that, creates flow. And again, if someone's really in need, right, and you have it, I advocate giving, right? I really do, or sharing. But also, there are people who just want you to give and they, bleed you dry, right? And so you have to be able to learn how to balance that and be strategic. So now we're moving to the collaborative wealth vehicle. And in this case, this is now taking all of the resources and value that you've identified as yourself, which is your unique set of capital, okay? And you say, okay, this is what I have to bring. And you find a group of like-minded people who have a different set of unique capital each. And then you begin to figure out how you can work together, either supporting one another or working together on a project and get further, because you're all bringing a different set of capital, which of course can be connections, equipment, some of it's cash, some of it might be an office. And a real simple example is that when we do events, we have strategic partners. So, oftentimes they're institutional, so they have plenty of equipment, the video, the conference rooms, all of that stuff. And that can be very expensive. So we partner with them, and basically they're sponsoring, right? So they get, and it's not free, right? It's an exchange of value. They're getting something and we're getting something. And in some cases, we don't do it anymore. We don't really do that many things anymore like that. But, at one point it was pretty regular, right? And so that actually saved thousands of dollars a year. And typically, often they would also provide the catering, or we would split it. Okay, so it ended up being a situation where we all got a lot more value without having to spend money, because we actually used what we had in abundance. We were very good at bringing key speakers, right, and doing the agenda. And the partner was very good at the facilities, and the planning of, running something, right? And so we were able to do something and everyone benefited. And that's just a simple example, but the principles are there, right? So the collaborative wealth vehicle, the first thing you want to do, because it takes time, and all of this takes time, okay? You need to develop and structure the resources and work with stakeholders and begin to understand yourself and understand them, and then understand the resources that they have, the networks they can connect you to, equipment that they might have, knowledge, information, all sorts of different things. And as you build that, you're going to find that you have more freedom to develop and grow your venture or your idea. Okay, and so you are actually getting capital, but it's not financial capital. Okay, and so in my example of what we do, I don't know how long it's been. We've built a lot of internal capabilities, but at the same time, we now have different partners that do different things, okay? That we can call upon to advise us, to show us whatever, where we might have to pay like $200 or $300 an hour, right? For someone to assist us because we're developing some new areas. And so as we're developing those areas, we are getting the excess of their knowledge, of their capacity that they're willing to share with us. And in return, we're able to help facilitate for them through our projects, contracts that they would normally have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to market, to sales, to try and develop, to tender, to do all of these different things. So, so again, we still have to spend money, certainly. But if I look at the percentage of money that we have to spend compared to other people, I can tell you that it's probably 50 or 75% less, okay, because of the way that we work. And so the resource-based collaborative wealth vehicle is very important. That can free you up to do a lot of different things. And plus, oftentimes, you now have a diverse set of advisors or stakeholders who are giving you different perspectives, which help you make your product or your platform or whatever it is much stronger. Okay, so that's the first thing. And what is this? Again, this is just a summary slide here, but it is now showing you what a collaborative wealth vehicle is. It is a group of people and organizations that have resources and, and their stakeholders, key stakeholders. And they are bringing to the table for your venture or your project a variety of different things, okay? And as you develop the relationship, as you increase the level of collaboration, you now have a greater level of commitment and execution, right? So that you can say, I know that I have this equipment and I can use it for a year. I know that I have access to this, and it now enables you to plan and to grow, okay? Just off of resources, non-financial resources, okay? And that's where you really want to be able to get when you're doing early stage or you're bringing something to market. You don't, in fact, I tell people, try and get this moving and implemented without having to put a single cent into it. Now, in reality, that's not the case, but if you think about it, right, it changes how you innovate, how you create. Now, as an example, when we're working on something, okay, so the other flip side to that is I'm not concerned about spending money, meaning I spend money strategically. I strategically go into debt in order to do that because I know that there's a great return. There's a huge multiplier. So, for example, sometimes I will, we will do something that a partner asks, and it's not something that's in the budget and it's not something I want to do, but I know that if I do it, it creates goodwill, and that goodwill is going to be worth more than that little bit of money, okay? So we do that, and then in the long run, we get the goodwill. And I won't give you any details, but as an example, oftentimes our partners really don't understand us and what we do. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. They know that there's an end value, but the process of what we do, they don't understand, even when we explain it. And so they ask us to do something in a certain way because that's what they're used to. And so we try to accommodate that. We step into that. We do that. And in the end, we find that, we can say, this is not working. Let's try it this way. Let's do this. And this is what we recommended from the very beginning. But because we went through it and because they could see for themselves, right? And we were willing to step in, put in our time and effort and, still stick in there, that creates a huge amount of goodwill. And it's amazing the things that have come our way just because of that. Okay, so, and a lot of times people will say, why are you doing that? I said, it's worth the investment. And one friend told me, he said, I admire you because if you only had $200, you would put $195 into something that had a purpose. Okay, and he's right. I don't think about, tomorrow I need to eat. I mean, I balance that, right? But essentially, I'm willing to invest because I know that I'm creating something much bigger that will multiply. So I don't, get hung up most of the time. I mean, we all have our days and times, but I try not to get hung up on those little things, because the flip side of that is that by investing in yourself and investing in others and doing those things, you are again creating a system of flow. Okay, so we went from the principle of sharing, giving, and volunteering, now working with stakeholders in collaboration, which is another level of flow that allows it to be more committed, right? Where you can lock certain things down. You can get some agreements when you're working at those higher levels of collaboration. So those are just some basic things. And we can understand that in the collaboration, there is a pooling of resources, a coming together, common goals, common activities, and we work together and we bring whatever's needed, whatever our strengths are to the table in order to create a synergy that gives us much more. Okay. And so that's really the foundation. When you have relationships like that, when you are flowing in that, then you can really begin to leverage financial resources. Okay. So the first one I want to talk about is Rotating Credit and Savings Association. They're called RCOSA something. ROCSA. Okay. RO from rotating. So basically, these are groups of individuals acting as an informal financial institution in the form of an alternative financial vehicle. Some are called susus. In South Africa, they're called stokvels. In Kenya, and I think most East African countries, they're called savings associations. And they've been around for a very long time, probably ancient, actually. And they tend to still be very popular for groups of people who have trouble using the mainline financial institutions. So you do see it in the United States, you see it in other places. Now you do have to be careful, because there are some groups calling what they do susus, but they're really pyramids. So, get educated on that. I won't get into all of that, but understand, what you're getting into. The second thing, these happen via set contributions and withdrawals to and from a common fund. Okay, so everyone's putting money in, but then they can get a loan or they get a lump sum of money. One person once a month, a different person. So again, the members pool their money into a common fund, and it's structured typically around monthly contributions, and then a single member withdraws the money from it as a lump sum at the beginning of each cycle. And this continues for as long as the group exists. So this is actually good, for example, because sometimes you need a lump sum, you're saving, and you're really just, in a sense, you're pooling it together, but you're, in a sense, saving this over a year, which you would do, but people tend to, when they're accountable to others, they tend to stick to it, right? And so there's a bonding or an accountability function of this that's very good, okay? And so it's great, because sometimes some expenses that you need to do, you need to have a lump sum in order to pay for it. Maybe you need a deposit for, a new office or something, and you don't quite have the money, but, again, by, having a lump sum from the group, you might be able to have that extra money that you need for that deposit. Now, the other thing is that typically the group is going to agree on how you're going to spend that money. Like, for example, you say you're going to put it into your business because it's going to help you. You're going to buy equipment, for example, and it's going to help you produce more. But then you go spend it on your child's, schooling. Now, that's not a bad thing, but you agree to use it for a certain purpose. So again, there's accountability, right? And so again, those can fail, but in principle, that's a collaborative wealth vehicle, but that's just focused mostly on financial. Now imagine if you can draw in people to work together in a systematic way, not only with finances, but with other resources. And often people will have more resources than they do finances to work with. Okay, and so that's another reason why we stress the resource-based CWV. Now, you can move from one level to another. You can do the rotating savings and then move to shifting that from the real economy, which is basically what we call the everyday job world, okay, where you get paid in cash. Now, this is where I'm going to get into a few things that are not specific to our webinar, but they're important to understand and why I'm stressing shifting from the real economy to the financial economy. So right now, most of us know that, there's economic problems globally. All of us should know it. A lot of us are impacted by it. And their businesses, people are losing jobs, businesses are closing because this is not just a once-off thing. It's lasting, for a while. It's going to continue to last. And so people they don't have the flow, right, of cash flow coming in order to sustain themselves. Again, going back to that reference of creating a flow, the importance of the flow, having the right thing at the right time in the right place. Okay. So what happens is when these things happen, like the disruption, the US government, the Fed, starts printing money. And that money, and actually I shouldn't call it money, it's cash, is a debt note, which means that it's not actually free cash. People are buying up the bonds in order to create and support that dollar being in the market, okay? And so that would seem like it's a good thing, but because we are off the gold standard, they print and continue to print without any underlying asset like gold or, whatever, okay? And so that printing basically begins to cause pressure on the dollar where it's not as valuable. Now, the difference between what happens to the real economy and the financial economy, which can be a part of assets, right, is that the federal government is really bailing out people who have businesses, have real estate, and are in the stock market. So what we see now is we see the stock market getting back up to the heights it was before this started, while the real economy is a bust. It doesn't make sense. But that's because there's no tether to reality in the financial market, really, okay? And so as long as they keep printing that money and bailing out the companies, there's no accountability or responsibility really for using that money. So what happens is the loans that people are getting, those that are wealthier, right, they're putting that into assets. They're buying stocks. And at some point they'll probably buy real estate once it comes down to the level they feel where it's not crashing, and other type things like that. They're putting their money there. People are putting money into gold, for example. They're shifting things. So that really leaves the average person out. That leaves people, startups and entrepreneurs out, okay? Because essentially, as they're doing that, it's also increasing inflation. So like my parents are on a fixed income. So this is actually going to increase inflation, which means that fixed income that they have is going to be of less value, okay? Because they're dealing with the US dollar, which is a debt note. Now, interestingly enough, this not only impacts the US, but it impacts the rest of the world, because those that do not have a strong currency exchange with the US dollar are even in a worse position. And many of them are getting loans based in dollars as their currencies are reducing. So anyways, it's a very, very, perverted system, okay? And the problem is that if you continue to stay in that side, you're going to lose money. You're going to lose the foundation. So the idea is to shift from that type of system to assets. Now, real estate are assets, and stocks are assets, and and you can actually invest in that. You can create assets, but you do have to be careful, because remember, On that financial side, they're doing things that are creating bubbles. Okay, so for example, real estate. Real estate, will probably go down. Okay, because people are, will stop paying their mortgages. Although in the U.S. there's mortgage forbearance, and so there's a lot of issues that are going to come along. So you have that are going to come along. So you have to be careful about when you do that. But real estate is a good thing, and really you're supposed to mix your portfolio anyways. You're not supposed to just do one thing. Stocks also should be a good thing, but unfortunately, we have a lot of people who are in the market that don't understand it, and they're pushing the prices up. Okay, and then there are people who have gotten loans, who are wealthier, who really didn't need them, for example, and are putting more money, that debt note money, into the market, and there's really not any consequence for them losing it. Okay, so if they win, they win. If they don't, they don't. Okay, so again, the average Joe and the person who is really dependent on that cash, right? The value of that cash is really kind of stuck in, a rock and a hard place. So that's where we now start looking at how to leverage assets. And the first thing is to find ways to take ourselves out of either bad assets like cash, like those debt notes, those liquid assets, into things that, have a more sustaining value. And so the traditional assets are cash, property, and stocks. I've already explained kind of why property and stocks, I'm not an advisor. I'm not giving you advice. I'm just doing it based on my own experience. Okay. So, again, looking at the timing and different things, and you really have to research that and do that yourself. This is just educational. And what we're doing here, like I gave you background of the principles and everything. And what I'm introducing to you is what we are actually working on and doing. However, it is not advice for you personally. You have to make your choice. It's education. And if you want to be, to learn more, that's great. Okay. But again, not financial advisors. We are working with people who want to work with us, not advising you. Okay. We will coach you on how to develop your idea, cultivate your identity, and, look at collaborative ways to, from an educational perspective, capacity building, to, develop collaborative strategies. But you have to be the one to implement, and you have to be the one to make those decisions. Okay. So we also then have alternative assets, and basically that just really means those are things that the main market doesn't really, engage with as much. We can think of precious metals. We can think of illiquid assets like artwork and intellectual property. And all of these actually can be leveraged to, develop means of, funding projects, either our own or others, without actually selling those assets and getting rid of them. And that's a key thing that I'll show you in a moment. But basically, let me also mention, as it relates to alternative assets, if you're an American, there's currently about $7 trillion sitting in pension funds and 401k. And that's a lot of money. And many of those pension funds and the IRAs, and really the 401ks, basically many people are not necessarily getting that much value, right? If it's a mutual fund, maybe they're getting maybe 3% per annum. And so inflation may start to rise faster than the value of your portfolio. Okay, so you need to be the person that's directing that. Okay, and as an example, you can direct your own 401k. I'm not going to get into details, but I will just say this. You take your 401k, you set it up as a self-directed IRA, and then you can do your own investing. You can invest in investable gold, which is typically bullion, or different types of currency, like I don't know, I think it's the Liberty coin. I don't know what they are, but the U.S. sovereign minted coins, and you can do that, okay? But it needs to be a self-directed IRA. So there are a lot of people who may be actually sitting on capital that they can use and leverage without getting rid of it, right? They need to use cash for a venture or something like that, but or they want to invest in something else that needs cash, but they don't want to literally lose the value of what they have, right? They want to allow for the use of it, but not for the selling of it in order to generate that cash. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. And so all of these alternative assets, all of these can be structured, whether alternative or not, to be monetized, which simply means that you're securing the money that you get, the cash, right, that you can use then as working capital, along with other capital forms for your venture, okay, or for your idea, okay, that's seed capital. And it can be even larger sums of money for larger projects. The principle works the same. Now, the difficulty has been is that generally to tap that, you have to have a lot of money. I mean, millions of dollars, 10 million, like $10 million, because there are fees and there are all these other different things that are done. One of the things that's done is that, it's called principal protection, which simply means that they wrap your asset with insurance so that you don't lose the value of that asset in the monetization process, where the group that you are investing in, right, or giving the use of your asset to, that your asset is in any way jeopardized. Okay, and that's important because can be situations, a lot of situations where people actually do this, but it's just plain collateral, right? Which means if the group doesn't pay back, the project doesn't pay back, then you don't get your asset back. But there are ways to do insurance and risk instruments to prevent that from happening, okay, in most cases. But again, this is just education, helping you to, see a different path. But again, the issue has been that, you needed like millions of dollars to access these platforms. And that's still the case. However, we're working with partners who have been able, because they're doing larger projects, for example, they're able to allow people to enter in smaller amounts, okay? And that's why we're now able to look at and say, okay, we can actually work on, building these pockets of collaborative wealth vehicles with a variety of resources and a variety of financial capital. Now, in reality, this is going to take about 12 to 18 months before cash will flow and be available. But in that time, you're building, you're preparing for that time, you're working on your idea, you're doing other things. So again, like I said, this is not a short-term solution, it's a long-term. Because once it kicks in, you can continue the process, you can multiply it, right? As I was saying, we're looking at exponential ways so that we have a continuous supply of resources and funding. We want to create that flow. So we're really just creating that flow at a higher level. Okay, so that's the second thing. So let me explain the collaborative capital, and then I'm going to show you just an example of how to do this, how this works, this monetization, just in principle works. So with collaborative capital, this is basically the process that we do. You, as individuals or collectively, we pool money and resources over a period of time. For us, it's basically 6 months to a year. You cultivate at the same time, you're continuing to grow, right? You're continuing to mature in your identity, your idea, and your investment capacity, right? And what's nice about this is we're not saying that you actually have to put your money together at any one point in time. If you don't want to, be collective to start out with, it's fine. But start setting a certain amount of cash aside. Start thinking about resources that you have that you're very strong in, that you have an abundance of, and that you can share. Okay, and that's also another reason why it takes time, because we typically don't pick up on all this stuff like right away. It takes us a while to get into the flow, and then we begin to be tuned to it, and we're easily able to, or more easily able to identify value that we can offer and participate in order to create that collaborative flow, okay, of resources and funding at a smaller level. And so then step 3 is to shift stored cash. Okay, so again, that cash that you are, holding on to for the purpose of a year. Again, this is a decision and there's risk in it, so you may or may not choose to do that. So you can shift that to gold, which over the next year, 18 months, Bank of America expects gold to go up to 3,000. And it's expected that the dollar is going to be muted, okay? And so that's a pretty good increase over a year. Instead of keeping dollars, you keep gold. And so you can do that yourself. You don't have to pool it with us. You don't have to do anything. Because again, you're building up and you need to get to a certain level. Then now, at a point, and again, you can do the rotating credit. You can shift to gold as an individual or a group of people, whatever works for you. Okay, but again, you're really only going to get smaller amounts of money unless you already have money that you can, leverage. Okay, and the reason that most people are interested is they're not able to get enough, money to really take their venture to the next level. So we're going to talk about that. So now once you are able to shift, and again, this is really individually or group, you're not you can be systematically doing it, but you're not necessarily looking to shift into the next gear yet. Okay, you're just trying to create flow so that you can actually, even if it's in smaller steps, you can keep moving. Now, then we get to leveraging the assets. That's now where we do pull it together in a formal structure, in a trust. And in that trust, the asset, the underlying asset, which is the gold, because what we do is even if you've kept the cash, when it's put in the trust, we switch it to gold. Okay. And that gold then serves to secure the potential, growth in available monetization for working capital or investment or funding into projects. Now, if you are not interested in a project and you just want to build your wealth, okay, this whole thing about identity, ideas, and investment are also important, because to make the right investment decisions, you need to understand what your purpose and passion is, and also understand how ideas are created, implemented, made feasible, how they're matured. So they all still fit together. In this case, it's not really passive, by the way. I don't want to say that because it's not, because you have to be actively involved. That also makes the difference between this being an investment vehicle that is regulated to one that is, that is a group of people working together. Okay. Now, for example, when we talk about leveraging assets, the entities who actually do that are, investment vehicles, Structures Financial, and their side of the equation is actually regulated. So it's interesting, we can marry the formal institutional things with people working together in order to help one another and get to the next level. Okay. So in that, again, you're shifting from those cash assets, and this is the financial part of that collaborative wealth vehicle. You still have all those other resources that you should have been building as well, that you can share, give, or or volunteer. Okay, that's the underlying principle. And so it's secured. Then it now goes to, now that it's secured, we can do two things with it. One, the value of the gold can be traded, meaning that they will keep trading gold, not your gold, because that's secure, but the value of that gold to make money. So over that time period when that's secured and when you don't have access to your asset, you can't use it for anything else. You can't, pull out money, but you can make money on it, which you can then use as working capital. And over that period of about 18 months, you might just have enough money to very well handle all of your core expenses. Okay, so that's one level. The second level is that you now have the ability to raise capital And this is what financial institutions do. That's why we as individuals and even collectively cannot do it, because you have to be licensed to do it. But basically, they can raise capital based on the underlying value of your asset, okay? And they can raise that capital. So let's say we put in $1 million, we can come back with maybe 10, 20 million, okay? And now, remember we talked about the group. So we all put together all of our different pieces. Now each one of us, let's say there were 10 people and they each put in 100,000. Now each person, because they contributed, they now each get $1 million. Now, why is that important? Because again, the ceiling to doing this type of thing is high. Even though we're working with people who are able to lower it, it's still high for most people, right? So the key is to, to find additional ways working together about how to bring that ceiling down so that people who are entrepreneurs, startups can tap that. Now, let me also add that in order to do this, you can't just tap those assets without cultivating identity, idea, and your capacity. We won't allow it. The group that we're working with won't allow it. So you have to be fully engaged. You have to be a member. You have to be a part of that. But I'll say is if you understand this and you want to do it on your own, you are welcome to do it. Okay? There's nothing that's stopping you. I'm not giving you any IP that you cannot use or whatever else. So if you want to create your own path, that's totally fine. But what we're doing now is, in order to make it even more accessible for people, because even let's say the group that we're working with, they're able to bring it down, for example, to 500,000. Okay, so if you got 1,000 people who put in $500, you could create a fund that could continually grow to help those different people, whether they wanted to invest in projects through that vehicle or whether they wanted to get money for their projects. Okay, so that's a doable thing. Actually, it's not necessarily that difficult, but most groups just don't have that number of people. However, what if we now networked different groups? There were 100 people putting in $500, right? Just once, in fact, okay? You don't even need to do that. And so we would need, how many groups would that be? That would be 10 groups of 100, right? And so there are ways to do it, but we have to collaboratively do it. We need to do it more broadly, with more people. But it's a doable thing now. It's not 10 million, it's down to 500,000, which is a huge, huge difference, okay? So again, I cannot explain all of these elements here, but I'm going to show you what it looks like in principle. The last step here is that now you can monetize the assets. Okay, even some of the resources, right? If it's equipment, if it's things that have value, there might be ways to monetize it, but it's hard to explain, but every different type of equipment, every different type of asset has a different way of valuating it and a different structure to maybe securitize it. So it's really quite complex. And that's not something that we would do as individuals. Again, you really need professionals to do that. But what we can do is we can work together so we can tap those resources. Okay, so I'm going to switch real quickly to, let's see here, okay, so I'm actually going out here and I just want to show you the website real quick. And this is basically a site where you buy gold, silver, other precious metals. And for those of you who are looking at the gold price, this is, what day is it? It is now, August 11th. You'll see that the gold price is down to 1900. It was up to 2000. And basically, again, there is a risk in this. Okay, so you can hold on to your cash. These are decisions and judgments you need to research before you do it. But overall, gold does hold its value. And if it's expected to go up to 3,000, there's a chance that you can make money off of holding gold versus cash. But I would advise, and again, not advise, how I would do it is money that I need immediately to use, I would keep, in savings, so I have it. And then extra money that I feel, whether it's only 10% of that, I would, I personally choose to put it in the gold. Now, in principle, you can buy coins, smaller amounts, but the problem is there's a premium. So basically, you're paying above the market price. Okay. So what I'm saying, if it's something that you're going to do, educate yourself. But basically, what most people do, if they have the money, is they buy it in ounces, okay, which means that there's not as high of a premium. And so that again may be something that you have to do collectively. So as an example, let's say you are going to form a group of either 10 people or 100 people, and then you're going to work together with other groups, right? You decide that you want to, start shifting some things into gold. It's better to buy it in ounces. So that means that you would need, for example, at least 4 people who, are willing to have their stuff shifted to gold, okay, to buy that ounce. Now, again, there's a trust factor because you're collectively buying it. So you're really looking more like an investment club, which is okay because investment clubs are good. But what you're doing is you're organizing yourself or a savings association. Again, you have a common fund in this particular case, okay? So if you're moving from that and you're buying the gold and let's say the value goes up, right? Then, you've all made a little money and and maybe you can just, it's money that you were going to save, but now you have extra money. Maybe that extra money you could put into your business, okay? If you weren't going to do anything else. So the good thing again about these larger vehicles is that again, they're going to protect the principal, meaning that it does not, like if you bought it 2,000 and it goes down to 1,500, your gold in terms of cash value is still 2,000, okay? And on top of that, you now also get value or a return for the use of that gold for the purpose of raising capital for projects, okay? And so in a year, okay, with the gold being used that way, again, you're not losing it, it's not being sold, it's still yours, it's just basically they're putting a lien on it, so it can't be used for any other purpose. And so basically now you get money every 6 months, okay? Money that was made off the trade, okay? Then, of course, and really the goal of this really is looking at people who have projects that they want to get funded, okay? And then that third level is that now as the money is raised, there's money for the people who are in these different pools to actually put, to get money for their project to keep it moving. Those who have invested in others, for example, now you get a second, at least one additional stream of revenue for the future. Because as these projects make money, whatever agreement that you've made with the individuals who got the funding for the use of your asset, right? Then they are going to give you a return. It could be equity, it could be just a royalty, you can combine it. So there is a way and a path to do this. And hopefully you can see that it's possible. But at the same time, it's something that you need to be working with people over a period of time so that you better understand it and you can make informed decisions. Again, in that principle of the leverage, I will show you this real quick here on the site. And this is just for a small amount. Let's see, where is it? Special order. Okay, here it is. So now you can actually, because it's an asset, right, that's being stored, you can actually go to the site and just see what they do. They actually give you a loan on your gold and silver and other precious metals without you having to sell it. Okay, so let's say you had a group who wanted to, keep the asset, still have that value, but have the cash flow from it, right? You could go here if you had more than $35,000. Now, the difference also, this is details that we'll get into, when we talk about this over time. But basically, they need a minimum of 35,000, and you also need to store it in their vault, which is typical, right? Because that way that they can actually account the value of it, and it's valuated properly, it's stored properly, and all of that. And so you get 75% of that at a low interest rate. Now, if the gold is going up, right, you're increasing the value of that and still having use of it, okay, which is great, okay. And so you can do this on a smaller level. You can collectively work together and increase value, for your future. If things are going in the way of gold, which it looks like, according to experts, I'm not the expert. So over the next couple of years, gold is a good thing. And so basically you can begin to increase value, but still have access, right, to the cash flow, okay? But again, there's a risk at this level. Again, this is education. This is not financial advice. So that is why, as a group, we can collectively work together and build towards the higher thing where we can secure the assets that we're putting in, even as an individual, but working collectively with other people or collaboratively with other people. So this is really something that, again, has been there. It's not that it hasn't been there, but it has not been available to people who did not have a lot of money. Basically, people who are already wealthy, right? Okay, so this is a means to do that. So we're almost done. Let me just point out a few other things related to this. So this is the process. This is what we're going to try and do over a year, over 18 months. So the options that you have, again, is because we're working, we're kind of like the mid-level, right? So we're working on that 500,000. That's us. And then we will be able to bring it down to groups who have smaller amounts of money. And basically they're getting the same thing, but because we're pooling, right? Then that means that they have access basically to the same things in smaller amounts. But our requirement is that you cannot do this so much as an individual. You need to work together with other people, okay? Whether that's you're a member of, what we do, or you work with someone else. It's fine. It doesn't matter. Either way works. So anyway, the first thing is that you can participate in a Pishan Path collaborative capital platform, individually or as a group. And I will outline this a little bit more in a moment. But you must be an active and in good standing member of the Pishan Path propagators and meet requirements of accessing collaborative capital. So for example, if your business plan, if your business is not feasible, or if it's not at a certain level, because for example, the way it works, we can carve out grants, we can do a lot of different things from this. However, if you don't meet those requirements, for example, you don't have access, okay? And you need to be an active member so you understand specifically what all these different elements are. This is not an easy path, meaning you don't just get money from out of the sky. You have to build and prepare for this. Just like you're building your venture and your idea, you also need to build this capacity for having that flow so that you can get resources and funding when you need it. You can also develop your own group, okay? Which means that you do not have to be in our pot. So as long as you're a member and you are, working towards, and you're an active member and you're building your capacity and all of that and meeting those requirements, you can form your own group. You don't have to be under our umbrella, okay? And so basically it's a platform, and you just use that platform. The third option, of course, is that you can carve out your own path. You can do this from scratch. It's there. You can do the research. You can even join our Pishan Path and, learn all about it and learn more detail and all of that stuff. And that's totally fine, and go off on your own. It doesn't matter to us. Okay. Because we do want to make sure that more people are actually able to, tap into that. So these are the options. Let me just explain a little bit more about PSHUM Path. It is a membership. And basically what we're providing are the three pillars. We are working with you in terms of education and capacity building to learn how you can manage all of this and actually do this. And if you're doing that part well, then you then have access to other resources that we will have. So basically, we have content, we have training, we have resources on all of those three areas. So typically, what happens is you will work on the identity part and the ideas first, right? And you will become solid in those areas, and then working together with other people, potentially, you don't have to again, if you're choosing the first option, is that you then begin to look and explore the investment part. And on the backside, you are then again trying to set aside or identify resources that you are willing to commit and share with others, or work together with people so that you can get more. Okay, and that's both financial and non-financial resources. And basically, you're building the assets over the year. And after that year, you're going to leverage and monetize the assets to increase your wealth and invest in projects and ventures. And some of that investment, again, so you can work both sides. You can invest in other projects so that you're generating, multiple streams of revenue. And on the other end, you can also, get your projects funded. This is actually quite flexible. There's no conflict with that. And of course, you're still able to make money off the gold trading that's going on. So you actually have really three options, your project getting funded, investing in others, and, the gold trading. And so after you receive your return on investment, after 6 months of the assets being leveraged and monetized, you start then getting the return on investment related to the gold trading. Okay. The project side, if you're investing, for example, will take you, like I said, whatever that venture is that you allowed your money to be invested in. For example, it might be 2, 3, 4 years. But what's nice about that is you're not just getting money immediately. You're now having different streams of revenue for the future, over, let's say, a 10, 12-year period, okay, 5 to 10-year period, okay? And so you then now have different streams that you can, again, save some of it, use some of it for your venture and personal needs, and invest again. And then you get that exponential multiplying factor, so that you now have a process of flow, a process of prosperity, basically multiplying, and then over time, you now create that wealth. Now, the interesting thing is you're accelerating it because of the way in which we're combining the different parts, okay? We're not relying on one thing. We have different things going on that help you build that faster. Now, you can, for example, or we can move this faster to some degree, okay? I don't see where we would go any faster than 6 months in terms of putting something into this type of vehicle, even if the everyone collected and worked together to do that. Now we're doing our own. We have our own path of doing that, and then again, as we're doing that, we're making it available to others. But the point is that there's a process and timing where people have to understand enough in order to participate, right? And make that choice, because you're making these own decisions. We are not advisors. We are not doing anything. We are in it with you, meaning that we're whatever, even when you're coming in as a member and you decide to do any of these parts, we are also putting in something in every single, structure that's being put together. Okay. So we're in it. We both benefit, from it equally. And that way, through collaboration, we're able to do this without having a lot of overhead basically. We allow the people who are experienced to do all of that, but we can just manage our relationships and, work together to help one another, multiply and, get wealthy from productive ideas, right? Things that go into production and, making use of all of our many different talents. So again, this is a good way of starting to create a local economy, being able to invest in your community. You can even do this, for example, if you're in a disadvantaged community or you want to service a disadvantaged community, you can come and have members together to create that flow of resources and funding so that you can begin to invest in the community. In a lot of places, for example, there are incentives. In the United States, there are tremendous incentives for working in disadvantaged neighborhoods that have been targeted, right? And you'll find in many countries that even if they don't formally have something, you can actually negotiate, to invest in an area to, build a plant, do whatever else. And wouldn't it just be great if you could not only, develop something that would create jobs, but something that will literally change an entire city or neighborhood, right? So again, there are a lot of details to this, and, definitely understand that, most of you will have to, go over this again and again, but it's a doable pathway. These are things that exist. They're not pie in the sky types of things. They are just not available to the average person or the average group of entrepreneurs because of the threshold. Okay, so in closing, just wanted to indicate the membership is a paid membership. Okay, that's a commitment that everyone has to make. It's $100 a month. And then you get full access to all of our capacity building stuff. And most people will tell you there's a lot of stuff. And again, we're expecting you to engage and build, because if you want your project funded, okay, not if you're not worried about getting your project funded, but you just want to participate with others who have projects or ideas, then it's not, it's still, you still need to be active, but how much, when, and where you actually get funding is really if you are moving on that path of bankability. Like I said, there will be opportunities for grants and different things along the path, but there will be requirements. So that's really separate from this aspect, okay? That's a whole different level. But you can participate in this part in the gold trading, right? And then investing in other projects, okay? Or putting, and really, let's not call it investing because it's not investing. This is an educational thing. But basically, it's coming together. It's called co-vesting. Basically, it's collaborative. It's not a traditional investment vehicle. We all come together under a common structure, and we all then get a share out of that structure, okay? And you can think of it as a joint venture, for example, okay? We all put in something, and then we get a percentage of what comes out, okay? But it's not an investment vehicle like a stock or or a mutual fund. It's not an investment vehicle, okay? It's a collaborative vehicle to generate wealth. Okay, and as a part of that also, we have new content weekly. We also will have 3 live Q&As per month. That's basically one for each of the pillars. And then we are also developing a platform that provides our tools, interactive tools that will help you go through all of these processes and help you manage all the stuff that we're talking about. And then also, if you're interested to move further into our programs, then there's a 50% discount on online group mentoring and coaching programs. And by the way, one of the partners, if you have a project that's, really interesting, they will maybe even support you being able to, go through it. They'll cover you, they'll sponsor you. So again, this is the offering. I know many people thought there was going to be a quick answer to this, and it's not, okay? But what we're trying to say is that there's a path that you can carve out. There's a path that we are currently carving out. And, it's a feasible, doable thing. But the way we're trying to address it is by creating a sustainable path, not just something that gets us something for the short term. And then, the next year, then we need something more. We want something that's a system, that's methodical. It doesn't mean that, there's no problems, no hitches, no anything, because that's just not life. But it does mean that, we have something that's more robust, that anticipates that there are changes that go on, but we are looking to create something that's creating a continual flow, not necessarily to one of us, right? But as a system, things are moving and shifting, they're growing, they're multiplying, and then we have an overabundance of resources and funding that are available for a broader base of projects. Okay? So again, I hope that this has been informative. I know it's a lot. You're going to have to listen to it over and over again. But if you are interested, you can sign up on Patreon under Pishan Path. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at info@conceptually.com. Thank you for joining me on this webinar, and I hope that it's been a good journey for you and that you have some more clarity and understanding. And, I look forward to us being able to work together and collaborate to get where we want to be with our projects. And again, remember, it's not about the finances, it's about the value, okay? The value that we're creating and extending and exchanging and flowing between each other and helping each other out. Okay, great. Have a great evening and week.